Now, we welcome this afternoon's Executive Perspective Keynote Series panel to the stage. A round of applause for the moderator of the conversation, my esteemed colleague, Steve Plumb. Steve will lead a discussion amongst AM's leading organizations. I'd like to welcome John Wilczynski, Executive Director of America Makes, Mark Burnham, Director of Policy for the AM Coalition, Shannon Van Deren, President of AMUG, Terry Wohlers, Head of Advisory Services and Market Intelligence at Wohlers Associates, powered by ASTM International. Take it away, Steve.
Good picture real quick here. So.
I don't bite yet.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the afternoon session of Executive Perspectives. So when I first heard the topic that we were addressing today, I thought, perfect, this could be interesting. And then as we got closer and closer to the event, it's like, this could really be interesting. Maybe I was using too mild of an adjective there. But as the old saying goes, may we live in interesting times is certainly applicable here. But luckily, we have the perfect panel to help digest all of what's going on and make sense of everything. You know, from AMUG's users groups to America's Makes, a diverse coalition of industry, government, academia, from the coalition's legislative point of view, and Terry, of course, is a wealth of information on everything additive and has been for a long time.
Thank you, Steve.
We kind of got it right.
I'll take my tip afterwards. So as timely as the topic is today, the truth is that additive has really been a global industry for a long time, which brings a host of opportunities and challenges, whether it's from competitive nature, regulations, or standardizations, and evolving technologies, and of course, workforce development. So I thought we could start things off by giving a broad overview of what your outlook is with everything happening. Shannon, I thought you might be a good person to kick this off, since you're just coming fresh off of AMUG last week in Chicago.
We are.
Any key takeaways that you can share?
Well, my first one was your glee and enthusiasm at the topic was not matched by me. Yeah, I think the user community is very vocal, and I think the users group specifically, because we are all kind of talking together, sharing our challenges, it is really a forum where we are not looking at each other as competitors, but really a unified body that is trying to embrace advanced manufacturing, expand its breadth, expand its application and adoption. I think there's some concern. I was hearing concern. I was also hearing optimism from the users. It can range from anything from, I was just chatting backstage with these gentlemen, we have some of the equipment coming from the Asian market that is notably less expensive than some of the other equipment, and that was going to be their large stride of entry, of redeeming reasons to purchase that equipment. And with tariffs on that, of course, now that low-end price of equipment isn't as low of a price of equipment once it comes into the United States. So perhaps there we'll see some changing directives of marketing models. Maybe they'll market more inter-country or other continents than the US. Also hearing some conversations of how does one pivot if they have an MOU or a purchase order with an equipment manufacturer outside of the US? What does that mean now? So if they, for one, have a loan for a piece of equipment, and now that purchase price at 25 or 50% is going to go up, how do they manage that money? How does the equipment manufacturer, how do they massage that together to feel like a success for both entities? They're on the more enthusiastic end, of course, is integrating more US manufacturing. And I think the equipment manufacturers, from what I'm hearing, are trying to figure out ways to utilize teams on both sides and make it feel less daunting for continual, especially capital equipment. Medical devices for my own company, I have medical implants coming in this week. I have a purchase price on that. So now that's going to be a tariff implemented on that. So we're all in the same boat, and I think together we're better. And I think the ideas of volleying, how do we make this successful, whether you're a buyer or a seller on a particular transaction, I think that's really the value of a user community coming together, because where one is succeeding, others can succeed along with them. So I don't feel that it is a daunting or a defeat atmosphere after the user group, but one of optimism and one of collaboration, which I think is really the best way for us to do business in changing times.
So John, do you have a similar perspective? TRX is going on as we speak now, co-located here. What's been the initial feedback from your members?
Yeah, so we typically put on 3 different events over the course of the year. 2 of them are very specifically focused on the portfolio that is being executed at the Institute, and the expectation is that the performers then come brief out to the community where they're at, what they've accomplished, either the direction that they're going, what they've accomplished, or ultimately the final results that are being disseminated. And we all realize there's lots of events and lots of demands on everyone's time, so the option to co-locate has been viewed very favorably by everyone so far. So I told them all we're going to check back on Thursday to see if they still feel the same way after 3 days of it. It turns into a lot going on at the same time, but in the end, we've had really positive feedback from both the co-location as well as the opportunity. So this year, we've, for the first time, have a pavilion, if you will, very large booth set up with members who are probably otherwise wouldn't have a presence here at Rapid, but through an arrangement with us and SME, we were able to create an opportunity for them to come together and make that achievable for them. So really positive feedback about that. Again, everyone's I think having solid conversations, that was one thing, and Shannon, I know we talked a little in the background. The interactions are very significant that are taking place. Maybe the numbers are different or even lower, but the quality of conversations and people's willingness to talk honestly about where we're actually at today, where we need to go. Some of that is, some of those conversations are pretty challenging as far as where we're truly at, but people are willing to have it, and again, the community is here trying to figure out how do we move forward.
And Mark, I know you took a group through the show floor this morning.
Yeah, so we've been working, the Additive Manufacturing Coalition really spends its time advocating to Congress and the federal agencies on behalf of the AM community as a whole. And a part of that is an educational aspect, because one of the challenges you face in Congress and in some of the agencies, while you have certain folks who are absolutely knowledgeable and are definitely advocates for AM, you also have a lot of folks who kind of have that general public knowledge base of, well, we think of it at the hobby level and maybe prototyping. And so one of the things we've been taking advantage of the last few years with Rapid, as well as some of the other trade shows, is the opportunity to bring through the trade floor, the show floor, some of the congressional staffers. So yesterday we had representatives from Senator Peters' office, Congresswoman Stevens, Congressman James, Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur, but those were district staff, but it was still important for them to see. Today we actually had a chance to spend a good chunk of the morning with the Defense Legislative Assistant for Senator Slotkin, but even she, who is a big advocate, she came in going, I don't know, I'm at this is 101, day 1 for me, because we had to start with, there are different genres of additive manufacturing, and this is what you can do, and here's where it's being done. They're sponges, they love it, they love to do that. They're interested, but they don't necessarily already know. And I think that's one of the things that we are trying to do as a coalition, is spend the time advocating to them in order to educate them about it. But I will also share that in addition to the conversations today and yesterday, the coalition has been in conversations with the administration since it took office. So we have communicated directly with the National Economic Council, talking about the importance of fostering an environment that allows additive manufacturing to actually meet the domestic manufacturing goals of the administration if we can create the right environment. Now, we can talk later about how that's going, but I think that there's opportunities for additive manufacturing, both in the defense and in just our general economic sectors, to play a much larger role in the national economy if we can get both the tariff policies right and some of the procurement policies right.
Terry, I didn't want to ignore you even after I complimented you. But timing for you is also good because you just released your annual report, which coincidentally is called the Wohlers Report. What were some of the findings? 30th anniversary now, I believe?
Yep, we've done the report 30 times every year for 30 years, and we're very proud of that. And so we look back, but we also look ahead. The past year grew a bit better than we expected, honestly. We're a data and information-driven organization. So if your methodologies are sound, you reach a lot of companies around the world, and they provide what we think is good data, then we rely on it to then report back to the world as to, and it grew by about, in round numbers, about 9% this past year, to about, in round numbers, $22 billion worldwide in products and services. System sales, AM machine sales were down this year considerably, but services, materials, and software more than made up for it, and that's how we got to the 9% growth. So looking ahead, wow, I don't know, it's this year could be an anomaly, and it could be a challenge, and I don't think, I certainly don't know exactly what is going to happen this year, and I'm guessing that most of us don't. We can maybe speculate a bit, but it's going to be a challenging year. At least it's shaping up to be that way.
I noticed for the first time you had kind of a range for your outlook. I believe it was like 80 billion to 120 or.
If you go out, yeah, if you go out 10 years, that's right. Yeah.
What are some of the factors that you see really affecting how fast it will grow?
Well, it's certainly it's about adoption, and really adopting the technology for volume production or volumes at some level. Of course, it's very different from one industrial sector to the next, but if we're only using it for modeling, prototyping, some tooling applications, that sort of thing, and of course we see on the show floor and elsewhere many interesting examples of production, but as a nation here in the U.S., and I would say that West in general really hasn't adopted it greatly for series production in other than, there are exceptions of course, but generally, and that's where the money is, and that's where this will ultimately go, and so that's how we get to these numbers of over 100 billion, in a few years.
So in yesterday's opening session with the executive perspectives, which I think included people, Stratasys, EOS, Materialize, Formlabs, the consensus was that the focus should be a little bit less on innovation and more on real-world applications, profitability, win-win type partnerships. But what does it take? What does that look like, and what will it take to get there? Shannon, any?
Yeah, I'm hearing that everywhere. Every conference that's been very consistent, beginning with the AMS conference at the start of the year, those same CEOs were saying that very same thing. And one, I applaud that. I think it's wonderful that they're not just, to be very basic, not selling a box for the sake of selling a box. They're actually helping people be met with success instead of acquiring capital equipment without maybe a roadmap of what they're going to use it for and how they're going to attain success. Because one disgruntled person can be vocal, and then they can relocate to another place of employment and be vocal about their their lack of success in that. So I think that's very responsible. And I love that they're saying it out loud. I think there's humility in saying that, you know, maybe this path that we had that we thought was right, lessons learned are terrific ways to make us be successful in our forward motion. And I think that they're doing that. Chasing the applications helps them know where their equipment or software or post-process technology, whatever those OEMs are, helps them to really define what they're great at. Pick the stones that you're going to polish. You're not going to be everybody's favorite, but you can be the absolute solution for success. And I like it. It all kind of bleeds into, I think every one of us has brought up collaborative mind. And in chasing something that they can help somebody be successful at, I think is being a partner or being collaborative together. And that, I think, is how we're going to win, how people are going to feel like less of an island as they're trying something new. We know, especially in metals are finicky. You do first pass yield, terrible. But not to be defeated by that, right? So I love this sort of mission from a user group space. We love to bring all of those applications together and have it really be a learning environment, because they then you can learn from across the fence of maybe what aerospace is doing or what medical is doing. We've had many happy collisions that were unanticipated at AMUG from people from other industries that yielded really wonderful outcomes.
And if I can add on to that, I think one of the things that we're hearing is there's less interest in sort of buying the new, latest, greatest technology. They're looking for what are the applications. They don't want to buy, you know, a great new technology. They want the killer drone. They want the killer app. They want the actual end product. And so the more that you can align to producing that, even if, you know, the other phrase of the day yesterday was boring is sexy, doing the things that need to get done in order to actually meet that need. And so I think that's part of where we can add on to that.
Yes, so just to keep piling on that, I would say we're seeing the exact same scenario play out at America Makes. As this past year, really over the last 6 months, we have a group within the Institute that is called our Roadmap Advisory Group. It's kind of the technical leads across a number of different organizations. And there was really a ground surge amongst the members, specifically a number of the systems integrators, so the kind of big players who are looking to adopt this technology, that have come forward and you know, acknowledge the work that we're doing is good, but we really need to shift our focus hard towards application, because if we don't, you know, we have no more time to keep, you know, placing bets all over. We need to start working on very specifically where do we need it to make a difference, and then how do we go point our activities towards that and try to focus to the point that we truly figure out, does it work or not? Does additive make sense for this scenario or not? So we're starting to kind of reconfigure how we build all of our technical working groups and our roadmap advisory group within the Institute. That is then we've been taking those products forward specific to agency partners. So we work very closely with different, you know, government agencies, specifically all of the services and the DoD, and have presented kind of a prioritized list across, you know, design and material and process and those kind of big swim lanes that exist within our community, to try to figure out where does the interests of industry intersect with the needs of our country as we look to make sure we're competing globally. I mean, that's the other main, I would say, trend we're hearing is where does the U.S. stack up? I mean, I get that question every time I talk, especially in certain scenarios. You know, where do we compare to what's going on around the rest of the globe? You know, when we talk to elected officials, they want to know, it's not even are we winning, it's are we competitive in the U.S., and then how are we collaborating with our allied countries so that we're working on the right things together to try to move those, you know, strategic initiatives forward.
So how does that need for cooperation and collaboration play into what's happening in the industry, whether it's consolidation or just the tariffs competitiveness, trying to make a profit? Where are some of the sweet spots and the areas that you can cooperate?
Well, I'll start. Y'all can be quiet. I won't. I love the collaboration. I think it is definitely making us stronger and more unified and having discussions. And I think we've reached a point now where we're having more authentic conversations. It's less posturing of what we can do in a lofty dream world. And this chasing specific applications is evidence of that, because there's no longer this kind of floodlight, but they're joining into a spotlight and really focusing on what they want. And I think that's because of collaboration. They're listening. No, I shouldn't say they, we are listening to each other. I know for AMUG, I am, as the president of AMUG now, I am being very focused on ensuring that I am in close proximity to these gentlemen and other industry organizations. You all are calling for that. If there's all these pillars, we're not going to be successful. We must talk, and we're hearing you. And by hearing you, that means we maybe have to change our ways. Instead of America Makes on a lane and AMUG on a lane and ASTM on a lane, but coming together so that we're sharing to drive each other towards success. I don't think, I'll speak for all of us, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think any of us want to see each other fall.
No.
Because if we fall, you fall.
Right.
And if you fall, we fall. So our big ambition is to really work in community. And ASTM is very authentic in that as well.
Yeah, we have 127 years of history of bringing people together to develop industry standards. And, you know, it's from experts like you who have come to help with those developments. And so, and we continue that work now in market intelligence and business opportunities and application development. Fried Van Craan, former CEO, he's the founder and current chairman of Materialize, said a few years ago that it's not going to be machines, technology, materials, software that drives the future of this industry, but applications. That's where it's at. And so, you know, that's, we need to be, like you say, focused in on those applications and what's it take to solve these specific problems versus just throwing out technology and products and hoping that, you know, they'll catch on.
I think another form of collaboration that's really important is us collaborating together to communicate these to the public policy officials that are out there. So part of that is the education activities we've been talking about as the coalition. Part of it's also about you inviting your local member of Congress to come tour your facility. One of the biggest challenges with regards to Congress is they don't know you're there. So when they talk about manufacturing, we're not in the conversation yet for some of them because they're not aware. When they become aware, like I said, the staff that was on the congressional floor, or on the show floor the last couple of days, they're walking through going, wow, this is blowing my mind. This looks like it's ready to take off. But they, you know, before they walked through the doors, they had no idea just what it looked like. They kind of just, it was amorphous, it was out there. And I think for the biggest challenge about the thinking about it in a hobby level, it's not that they don't know, it's what they think they do know. And that's worse, because what they think they know is actually not correct. So they don't consider up front that there's an additive manufacturing base that they can turn to that can be used in this way to meet national defense and economic needs. So part of that is changing that narrative. To that end, one of the things, and I'll take, if you don't mind, just a little commercial plug, we are doing our third annual DC Legislative Fly-In May 6th through 8th, and we'd love to have all of you come to meet with us and go to the Hill and meet with the administration. We'll do 2.5 days, and last year we did 70 congressional visits over 2 days. We'd love to have you be a part of that.
Is there a specific focus for the fly-in this year?
So the fly-in's going to be focused, we're going to talk obviously about tariffs, but we're talking about procurement reform. To participate in a panel yesterday about what's needed to make it easier for small and medium-sized companies to actually do business directly with the government, particularly creating new forms of contract vehicles and less than full production requirements so that you can get to a production contract at a procurement contract, not just a research. So so we don't leave people at a SBIR phase 2 or phase 3 and just left to drift, but actually that there's a path for folks to actually go directly to, or even for the GSA to make it easier on the GSA side for companies to improve their systems, come up with the next iteration, and not have to have such a difficult time on the GSA schedule, but make it easier for folks to actually work directly with us, and that's what we're trying to do.
That's a good segue for the next question. Once you get past awareness and education, what role can and should government play in helping to advance additive manufacturing, both here and abroad?
Well, let me start, but then I think all these folks have a lot to say there. But I think at a minimum, we have to acknowledge that the Department of Defense has been the biggest funder of manufacturing growth and engineering for decades and generations, not just for AM, but clearly it's going to play a continued key role, whether that's through DoD, NASA, medicine, all sorts of areas and applications. The federal government's going to, by necessity, play a very key role, at least as customer, and in some ways as a user themselves.
So I'll talk from some of the work that we're doing. I'd say DoD in particular has been a major contributor. I think we're all plenty aware of that in the technology, but I think where we're at right now is interesting in that we have a number of national defense capabilities that we are either desire to have or are in development of right now that are heavily dependent on additive manufacturing, which is a really interesting position to be in. On one hand, they're designing in a capability that on the other hand, we don't know that we have an industrial base that can actually currently achieve the capability. And we've heard it from some of the primes in particular that if or when this particular program comes online, there's not enough machines in the country to meet their need. There's not enough material. We could not produce enough material, or we can't get it from sources that we're willing to purchase from to actually supply the quantities that we're looking for. But on the other hand, we hear from, we regularly, and I'd be interested in Terry's take on this because I think they've got some good data from other parts of the globe. The U.S. model for investing in this, although there's been significant investment, is not one in most scenarios where they're going to fund activity, for we might need it someday capability. And we're in this chicken and egg right now with the scenario that I mentioned, where if you're all of you, won't speak for you, but if I was in your shoes, you're not willing to buy X million dollars worth of equipment for the order that might come someday. So we're in this really delicate time right now. But I would say in conversations that we have, particularly with DoD, where you're seeing some of that change. I think we're all very aware of what's going on within the maritime industrial base and the surge of activity that has taken place there, and the significant investment, very targeted investment that has taken place there. We just actually at our event that's going on in parallel to this, we had some folks, we had two different briefings for kind of national level capabilities. One is a materials program that's being piloted that we're working with Department of Energy and Department of Defense on, and a second that is specifically focused on building out a larger testing capability within the U.S. to try to offset some of the constraints that are currently existing within test houses that exist. So I'd say there's a lot going on, but we don't have a model like we may see in some near-peer adversaries that are just investing in it for what might be the future.
Want to jump in, Terry?
Yeah, so testing is definitely a bottleneck for the development of materials, for example. And it was great to see Northrop Grumman a few years ago, maybe 3 or 4, that gave the material data that they developed and put it in the public domain. And that collaboration, I think that's a good example of what can be done. But I have a question for you, John. So, if you don't mind, Steve. Sure. So, can you name the application or applications that would tap out, that would require more capacity than we currently have it here in the U.S.? No? Okay.
I could, but
yeah.
I won't.
He'd be in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay.
We know of some. There are at least a few who. I mean, we've heard from a couple of different folks in the, I'll say, aerospace and defense world.
Yeah.
That are there are programs in queue that will be significant that are heavily dependent on AM.
So
in particular scale, size factor that really ultimately drives it.
So from a capacity standpoint, how does it ramping up from an additive manufacturing compare to ramping up for traditional manufacturing, and what will it take to get to meet that demand?
I'll give it a go. I'd be interested in Shannon's take from a user, or someone who runs a shop actually, versus mine. But I think one of the big problems that we have is our lack of understanding of how to rapidly qualify and bring equipment up online and get parts qualified versus what we know how to do in the conventional manufacturing community. Coming from that world, if you were to tell me I needed to double production, I could, in a machine shop, understand how to do that and do it pretty quickly and effectively. If we were to need, again, I'm not the expert. I've not done this personally myself, but if I asked you to, double or quadruple your production of your operation, could you do that? And if you can, what enables you to do that? And if you can't, what's preventing you? So I could imagine if you have a fixed, you needed to make 100 of these, and tomorrow I'm asking you to make 400. If it's this very specific thing, maybe the answer is yes. Maybe I'd be interested in what your answer would be if we could or could not do that.
Well, I think that changes at contract manufacturers because it's a dynamic, moving puzzle, right? You might have an influx of orders and then kind of a lower order. It might be a restock order instead of an initial order. And a lot of that comes into your negotiations of memorandums of understanding. Are they promising delivery? Is there you're not going to want to make a blind investment, especially now because what you had planned to grow per piece of capital is now going to change with tariffs on top of that. We get asked at AMUG at the panels all the time because I think they are looking for one of us to have a different answer, which is, how can you scale? And what I love about this community is we're all answering the same way. There isn't enough assets to answer that demand. And I don't know the specific applications. I knew it was for defense. But they're looking for that solution. And I think there is such grandeur in that no matter where they go, to a contract manufacturer, to equipment manufacturer, to an America Makes, that the answer is the same. And so there's trust in that. If we were all over the place, who could they trust? And if they are trying to build asset management and acquiring parts for critical purposes, wouldn't it be a horrible reception for them if we were not in alignment? So I think the investment now, of course, the tariffs change everything. If you're going back to the contract manufacturing side, it's going to become a lot of volley of conversations with those that you're buying from, whether it's equipment, materials, software, post-processing equipment. We're all going to have to learn to do business differently for achieving the same goal, sustainability and growth to follow. But an immediate recoil is not going to work. Lofty projections that you can't fulfill is not going to work. Again, the importance of being very intentional together, where we're learning from another, not afraid to say I don't know, not afraid to ask the questions, so that we can build a consistency in this environment and be able to grow responsibly and with good financial stewardship for our own business, as well as the spends that they're making. We want success for them as well.
But I think one of the things we'll have, in addition to answer those questions, in addition to the technology investments, the infrastructure investments, is the people. We have to have a trained workforce. And that requires not just a desire to hire people, but a way to train them. And so we need to make sure there continues to be and there needs to be more investment in training opportunities from everything from the shop floor to the PhD, because to design for AM is critically different than just traditional manufacturing engineering, but it's also different for how you do it on the shop floor. And so those training programs are going to be vital. And I think you see with what's going on with the Navy and the stuff in Virginia, they've got a good training model that I think we want to replicate.
So to tie in what John, Mark, and Shannon, we were just talking about, capacity, geopolitical events, and workforce, how does additive play into the ongoing workforce shortage in the U.S. and the world, reshoring back to the U.S., and just finding good partners, or whether it's in the U.S. or around the world? I know the Leading Minds organization was launched last year to help out in some areas, but what does that look like in terms of advancing the industry?
So I'll give it a swing. So I think a couple of things that we're seeing are, one, I mean, we have a lot going for us. So our community at large has a lot to, you know, I didn't really think about this ever, but I was at a convention or a casting show, and I was in this interesting, like, debate almost up on stage where we were intentionally pitted against one another and supposed to, you know, explain why our technology was superior between castings, forgings, and additive manufacturing. And both of the others, you know, pointed out something that I never really acknowledged was, you know, what we get to do and what we work on every day is really cool. You know, at the end of the day, it's really cool stuff, and
Yeah.
it's easy to convince children in particular, and they're teaching it so widely across the school systems that there's a tremendous amount of exposure. So we've got a lot going for us. The hook is, how do we keep them engaged from their, you know, like, I have a daughter who's 14 at this point, who went through, was really excited about it, and has basically lost all interest in that.
A
because
teenage girl changed her mind?
No comment. But it's part of it is how they're, you know, part of the way the school system is teaching it. So they used it a lot when they were little and explained, you know, techniques via the technology. But we're seeing kind of a gap from then on. But I think there's a hook. There's a big hook in our technology that we can pull people in. So I think we've got a big advantage if we can show that there's work that they can go off and do and actually, you know, make a good living at. So that's one of the things that we're trying to work at. And I think there's a important reality that it's got to be integrated into what else you need to do to operate in a manufacturing environment. So it's not, I mean, there very likely can be additive companies who just do that. It's probably more likely that you're going to be doing additive along with many other processes within your organization. And that's kind of the big, I'd say, trend that we see taking place, is many more people are looking to adopt it and bring additive into existing manufacturing environments versus just standalone additive entities. So I think, you know, again, we got to figure out how to keep, you know, put our hooks in people and pull them in, but show that there's enough demand that, I mean, we run into this ourselves. We create programs or work with people to create them. If there's not a job on the back end for them to, you know, go and ultimately graduate, if you will, into, then you know, we have to think about how the approaches that we're taking there. So I think that's the challenge for us.
Yeah, I think one of the things about that, which we've communicated the last few years to the federal agencies and to the Congress, that we try to say is there has to be intentionality. You have to show and demonstrate that there's going to be a purchase opportunity, there's going to be contract opportunities, there's going to be a customer, so that can drive in that opportunity, drive the industry to work there. The difference, I think, on the reshoring is we're already here. You don't have to entice us to come back, but you do have to put together an environment that allows us to grow and thrive. And that's part of the message that we're trying to carry, which is if you create the right environment with the right policies, you don't have to go and pay, you know, a traditional manufacturer to reshore a facility, which is a lot harder. We can expand and we can grow faster than they can reshore something like that. And you see that, you know, what was going on with the CHIPS Act, and we were talking about it at lunch earlier. Is the CHIPS Act even still functioning because of what's going on? So that was a whole big effort, and you would have to replicate it again and again. With additive, you don't have to do that. If you provide the right incentives, if you provide the right environment, we'll grow, we'll expand into that space, but a big part of that is having that demand signal and meaning it.
So we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here. Shannon, you raised the T word already, and I think in the last 6 minutes, we can really solve this.
Oh, sure.
You think?
We'll solve it.
So how much uncertainty is it creating in the additive world? And what do you see in the next year or so as far as how should companies respond to this, and how can they plan?
Oh dear, well that's a very responsible question that I cannot take ownership of. I think that the worry on the tariffs is felt whether in the additive world or outside of the additive world. It's going to affect everybody. And I was very intentional in talking to the users this last week about this topic because I had such trepidation about being on a stage talking about tariffs. I didn't feel fear from the user community, and I'm speaking on just a small smattering, and there's so many more that can have very differing, or perhaps they embrace on that. It didn't feel like fear and trepidation. It felt more like strategizing differently. What do they have to do to keep the appeal? What do they have to do to be sustainable from a sales process, whether it's selling the equipment or using the equipment to sell a product to a buyer? I think everybody is going to have to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to be successful without gouging anybody by way of the excuse of a tariff. We certainly don't want to see that, and I didn't hear anybody looking at it as an opportunistic means to yield business. They're looking at it as a way of how do we glean success from a difficult situation with an expectant customer who has needs, and how do you fold everything together? And I think what it's going to take is everybody coming to the table, your supplier, you, the manufacturer, and the customer, and what makes sense, because there are needs. We can't avoid the fact that they're there. We're not going to change it today. So again, I mean, we're really all kind of floating in the same boat on this and coming to a place where we're being conversational, we're being humble, we're being authentic, and people will embrace that, I think, together. If there isn't this posturing of I'm better than another, how do we do this together in community for the success of all of us, no matter where our place is in the storyline?
I think with regards to tariffs, one of the things that everybody's been trying to figure out is this simply a bargaining strategy, or is this a change in policy, or is it a bit of both? And I think at the end of the day, we're not going to know for a while which way it really breaks, but I suspect, I'll put it that way, that for at least some, they'll make bargains and deals and make an arrangement. I don't know if that's true for every country. We would hope that it would be for, but I can see some progress in certain areas. But I also see tariffs of some sort being in place for a rather long time in some other countries. And that's going to affect how we play this out. As I said before, I think we're actually, as an industry, well positioned to grow if we get the policies right and if we're able to position it right. And part of it is also trying to figure out what exactly is the administration's goal here. Is it about, and I'm going to fumble with this a little bit, so I apologize. Is it strictly about we want American companies? So I'll put it in the context for our community. You've got the American-made printers companies. You have American companies, manufacturers, using additive manufacturing printers, but they may be from other places, but they're an American company making parts just using AM. Which way do they want to go, or do they support both of those, or what? And I don't know that we have a clarity from the administration yet on what goal is higher priority there. But I do think there's a true desire for them to grow domestic manufacturing. And I think the reality is we're in a better position than most traditional manufacturing industries to actually be able to meet that goal, or at least partially meet that goal. And so I think that's our hope, that we'll be able to convey that successfully and help move the country forward into a different regime of both. You know, we're in a different world. We're not in a free trade world anymore. I'm not sure we know exactly the final shape that this is going to be, but I think we can take advantage of it if we can get them to just make some adjustments.
You know, Mark, our industry, excuse me, is made up of problem solvers. You know, AMUG, a very powerful, strong group of problem solvers. And While I personally don't see many positives, I'm an optimist. I really am. I'm optimistic about the future on a lot of things. But when it comes to tariffs, I have yet to identify any positives other than I think we'll come out the other end stronger as an industry. I really do. I think we'll, just as the pandemic, we learned so much and we came out stronger from it because we learned how to behave differently and manufacture differently and work remotely and manufacture high volumes of nasal swabs and all kinds of things of that sort. And I think we are stronger as a result, and I think the same could be true in this case as well.
I like that you said that. I think challenges give us a chance to build new skill sets that we didn't know we needed to learn, but that can be really instrumental with whatever's coming forward. So I like that you said that.
John, I'll give you the last word.
Oh, perfect. So yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think the one thing we're seeing, I mean, we've been contacted several times in the last couple of weeks even about, and I don't know what all is driving this, but about organizations looking to move, set up operations, understand that there we understand the size of the AM market in the U.S. and its position in the global marketplace. You know, one, we all know we want to keep that, and there's a strong acknowledgement that building in the U.S. is going to be a positive, viewed positively by the administration. What that means, how it shakes out, I think the uncertainty is the biggest challenge right now. The change in the rules day to day is really difficult to plan against. If we can get the handle on that and lock them in, we will find a way to win at this when it's all said and done.
Agreed.
I'm glad we solved that. Yeah. It was
all fixed, right?
Great way to end on some optimism. Thanks, everyone, for joining in, and thank you.
Please welcome back to the stage Group Director, AM Series, Angie Zerlong.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you to our panelists for sharing your insights this afternoon. Join us back here tomorrow morning for 8:30 for our final Executive Perspectives keynote series. And be sure to join us this evening as well for the AM Industry Celebration, which will be back in this room with music, fun, entertainment, all of that. So hope to see you all back. Thank you.